Hello, my name is Philipp Leitner. I'm an associate professor at Chalmers and at the University of Gothenburg. And what I want to do is I want to talk a bit about bots in software development. And the work that I will be presenting has been done in collaboration with my PhD student, Linda Ellenhoff, and with my colleague, Francisco Gomez, who we will also hear a little bit from kind of in the second part of this presentation. So I think we can all agree that software development as a discipline is increasingly getting more and more complex. The stress put on developers is increasing, and the pressure to deliver code and high quality code in short time is increasing. And one way how developers nowadays tend to deal with that is through the usage of bots. And this is what this presentation is going to be about. So what we did in our research group a couple of years ago is we did a fairly large interview and survey study where we tried to figure out what exactly makes a tool a bot? What characteristics are important for a tool to be considered a bot and not just a regular development tool as we have been using for years? And as it turns out, there is not just one answer to that question. There's actually three different answers depending on what tool you consider and which person you're talking to. So my goal for the rest of this presentation will be to talk a little bit more about these different types of bots and the different personas that are involved, and also what kind of advantages they're trying to get out of using a bot. What we did in our research is we distinguished three what we call personas in our research. So three types of developers, or you could also think of it as types of tools that think in a different way about bots. And the first kind of persona is what we call Alex. So they all have these nice gender-neutral names. So for Alex, what a bot really is about it's about automation. So you probably all know examples of these types of bots. So for instance, DependerBot on GitHub is a very common example. These are automation tools that do something on their own, typically in the CI pipeline. So that's one type of bot that many people have in mind, but it's not the only one. A second type of bot, very, very different to the automation bot in reality, is what we call the Charlie style bots, or the Charlie persona. So for Charlie, what the bot is really about is it's about the interface, it's about communication. So Charlie is essentially the chatbot persona. For Charlie, it doesn't really matter so much what exactly the bot does, as long as it communicates with the developer over a natural language interface. So you could think of chat ops tools, you could think of any kind of tool that uses something like Slack to interact with the developer. And if you think about it, that's actually a very different type of bot than the first one. So the DependerBot barely even talks to the developer at all. It does its thing on GitHub and then it posts a report about it. So for the Charlie bot, it's very, very different. For Charlie, the definition of what a bot is really all in the way how it communicates with the developer. But that's not all. There is also a third type of bot, or a third type of persona, the SAM persona. And for SAM, what really makes a bot special and interesting is that it does something that goes way beyond what we normally expect our development tools to do. And a good example of this is the GitHub Copilot, which we have already seen in one of the keynotes for this event. And what Copilot essentially does is it generates code for you, and not just a line of code or a simple, very small snippet, but it actually generates a pretty non-trivial amount of code for you. So that's not something that we would typically expect our development tools to do for us. And there's quite a bit of machine learning in somewhere in the back of the Copilot engine, and that's a typical example of what SAM would consider a bot. So it's not about the interface, it's not even about automation, it's really that what the tool does feels closer to what a human can do than what a normal development tool can do. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages, the benefits of using bots. And really what we have seen in our research is that there is two kind of broad classes of benefits that people are trying to get out of using bots. On the one hand, there are productivity related advantages, stuff like the automation of annoying, tedious tasks, but also, a broad class of information sharing related advantages. We have seen that many bots, especially chatbots, aren't really there to automate anything, but they're there to increase productivity by bringing information together under one kind of central hub, for instance, Slack. But in addition to these kind of productivity related advantages, we have also seen that some bots are really bringing advantages that over what a human could directly do. And this is usually because bots have certain obvious advantages. For instance, bots do not sleep, so they can be available 24/7. They don't go on vacation. Bots do not get overwhelmed. They do not, even if they have to handle hundreds or thousands of very similar kind of tasks, they do not introduce sloppy mistakes or make simple typos or errors. And through that, what many projects have observed is that using bots actually allows them to improve the code quality, because bots in a way introduce consistency where humans would sometimes make mistakes, especially during particularly tedious or annoying tasks. So what I want to do now is I want to leave the word to my colleague Francisco Gomez to talk a little bit more about bot ecosystems.
Thank you, Philip. Now that we understand a little bit better about how these bots work individually and how they are, we want to look at projects working together. So both the bot-to-bot interaction, but bot-to-human interaction in multi-bot projects. That's why we call them ecosystem. As these different bots are changing, developing, editing, creating different resources on the development environment, we want to understand what type of dependencies, bottlenecks can we find in those interactions. One of the biggest motivation for us in seeing that these bots work in an ecosystem way, just like in nature, was that developers were reporting that they had bots fighting with each other or competing with each other, in which one bot would create an issue that would be then later be automatically closed by another bot. So we need to understand better what type of relationships do they have. So we've identified 4 different species of bots: the keystone, niche, dominator, and observer bots. What all these bots have in common is that they use and operate on what we call resources, and those are artifacts created by humans or bots in a development environment, such as code, test cases, issues, pull requests, etc. The 2 most interesting species that we've seen are niche bots and dominator bots. The niche bots, they feed on these resources typically created by other bots in order to fulfill a task for a human. So they generate value to the human. An example is the Pennabot that warns developers about dependencies in a project that need to be updated. The dominator bot, on the other hand, they actually assimilate different development tasks into a composite functionality. So for instance, the Docker build push bot that already in one action builds a Docker image and pushes that into a registry for containers. When we did a case study by looking at bots in a company that the bots were in-house developed, we found some interesting stuff. So first of all, we didn't see what we would expect a food chain in nature to look like, where the keystones bots that tend to sustain the ecosystem would be the majority of the bots. In fact, most of the bots were niche bots. We also saw something interesting with the dominators that they have. The fact that they are very general purpose, it made them useful and convenient, but also risky. So those dominator bots, the fact that they aggregate several tasks, made them really hard to maintain. It was very difficult to add new tasks to them or remove existing ones to reuse in separate projects. In fact, one of the dominator bots was discontinued in this project. With that, we started to question ourselves, are there more species? Do we find perhaps endangered species or types of relationships that we want to preserve or we want to encourage in these ecosystems? So it really drives us to look for more balance on how we use bots, such that they're less disruptive and possible, but still meaningful in development. Well, that's all. Thank you for listening. Here's some of our material, and we hope to hear from you soon.